The second, let's see if we can bring it up here. Yeah. The second is a stupa. You all know what a stupa is, right? And actually, the Chinese text calls it a treasure tower. And this is a story. The Lotus Sutra is full of stories. I should have gotten Wang Fai to promote my book. I've got a new book coming out November 1st. I assume you can, in Singapore, you can buy things on Amazon. It's coming out November 1st. You can order it now. They've been selling it for a couple months already. It's called The Stories of the Lotus Sutra. And the Lotus Sutra is full of stories. If whatever else the Lotus Sutra is, it's a storybook. And it likes to use stories. I just misspoke. I don't think that the Lotus Sutra uses stories. The Lotus Sutra tells stories in order to move us. And for the Lotus Sutra, I think the stories are not used to illustrate doctrines, but the other way around. Doctrines are used to support stories. And I may try to talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. So this comes from a story. It's a story from chapter 11. The text has 28, in our current Chinese, Japanese versions have 28 chapters. This is from chapter 11. And at the very beginning of the chapter, this stupa. Just let me remind you that a stupa is supposed to be a place for the crematory remains of somebody who's been cremated. So the only thing that should be inside of a stupa are ashes and bones. Well, maybe a tooth or something. But it's basically what's left over after somebody's been cremated. So now this great, tall, wide, it's, I have to read this. Well, I translate it as 500 leagues high and 250 leagues wide. Of course, I have the slightest idea what league is. But what the story wants to tell us is it's very tall, very wide, and very beautiful. There are jewels hanging all over it, and there are various ways in which it goes on. The text goes on in great length to describe how decorative and how beautiful this stupa is. And it emerges without warning. There's no warning at all. It just emerges out of the ground, and it hangs in the air in front of this big congregation. And out of it comes a voice praising Shakyamuni Buddha for teaching the Lotus Sutra. Well, of course, everybody is shocked. How can there be a voice coming out of a stupa? And how can a stupa be hanging in the air after emerging from the earth? This doesn't make good sense. And so they ask the Buddha, what is this? What's going on here? And the Buddha explains that the Lotus Sutra likes to, have long everything, or tall. This is another footnote. In chapter 24 of the Lotus Sutra, there's a story about a bodhisattva in Sanskrit called Gadasvara. I call it wonderful voice. Myo-on. It could be wonderful sound or something. More literally, it would be wonderful sound. Anyway, he comes to the earth from another world and flies through lots of worlds from the east, flies through a lot of worlds in order to get here. And it tells us how tall he is. Now, the word I'm translating as leagues has been interpreted in many different ways, but if you took the shortest length for this unit of measurement and applied it to the height, how tall this bodhisattva is, I just figured this out recently. I never done the arithmetic before. Turns out he's about his height. Now you got to remember now, he's coming and visiting Shakyamuni Buddha on Mount Gridhakuta in India. He's as tall as 80 times the distance from here to the moon. So the Lotus Sutra is not afraid to use big, you know, in American English we've got this, what is it? Mind-busting ideas. It's mind-stretching ideas. That's what the Lotus Sutra tries to present us with. And so this stupa that emerges from the earth in chapter 11 of the Lotus Sutra is described in very flamboyant ways. And then when the Buddha explains that it was a long time ago, he really means it was a long, long time ago, that a Buddha, actually before he was a Buddha, when he was still a Bodhisattva, this guy promised that whenever somebody was really preaching the Lotus Sutra, he would go to that place in his stupa to congratulate the person who was doing the preaching. So after the Buddha makes that explanation, the people around him say, well, what are we waiting for? We need to open up that stupa and see this body that's inside. Actually, I kind of missed a thing. When Buddha's explaining this, he says that this Buddha, who's called maybe many treasures or abundant treasures, I guess I use, abundant treasures. When abundant treasures made the promise that he would come to wherever the Lotus Sutra was being preached, he said he would come in his whole body. So now the people that are witnessing all, they want to see this whole body. How can there be a whole body in a stupa? And the Buddha explains, well, it's difficult. He also said that if anybody wants to see his whole body, it will be necessary to assemble all of the Buddhas from all over the universe. Now, in Theravada Buddhism, we don't have so many Buddhas. One. But in Mahayana, we've got virtually infinite number. All kinds of, we've got surpluses of Buddhas. It's like going to a Chinese banquet. Too much food. So the Buddha explains so the Buddha explains that they've got to assemble all of it, and people say, well, let's do it. What are we waiting for? And so the Buddha takes out his cell phone. Oh, no, he didn't take a cell phone. He sends out a ray of light from this tuft of hair between his eyebrows to inform all of the Buddhas all over the universe that they need to come, assemble on earth. And, you know, generally in religion, not only in Buddhism, but generally in religion, there's not a lot of humor. But the Lotus Sutra does, I think. I mean, people don't always take it as humorous, but gosh. So the Buddha cleans up this earth, purifies this world, so that the Buddhas from other worlds can come. And they become, you know, there are 8 directions, right? And the Buddhas, and then Buddhas don't travel by themselves. Buddhas always need some bodhisattvas to carry their suitcases. It's true. You've never heard of a Buddha going anywhere without somebody or in Mahayana Buddhism. You've never heard of a Buddha going anywhere without having bodhisattvas with him. Abundant Treasures is the only one I know that moved around, and he's dead in his stupa. Well, anyway, so the Buddha has invited the Buddhas from all over the universe, and they're going to come first from the eastern direction. And before all of them have arrived from the eastern direction, the place is full. There's no more room for anybody to sit down. So the Buddha has to, in other words, the Buddha lost track of how many invitations he sent out. It'd be just like you, sending invitations to a party, and people start showing up, and pretty soon there's no room for anybody to sit down, so you have to go across the hall and borrow your neighbor's apartment, so you have a little more space. And that's what the Buddha does. He borrows several worlds from around this world, purifies them, and allows all these Buddhas and their bodhisattvas to come and assemble. Well, this stupa, we're told, this one, this is Abundant Treasures Buddha, is in the middle of this, sitting there. And sort of at the climax of the story, but not so important for my emphasis tonight. At the climax of the story, Shakyamuni Buddha goes up. This is hanging in the sky. We don't know how high up, but it's hanging in the sky, and Shakyamuni goes up to that stupa that was there a second ago. And he goes up to that stupa and he opens the door with his right hand. There's a reason for that, which we won't go into. He opens the door and there's a sound. I've always been fascinated with the idea that door goes, I don't know how to mimic the sound of a big wooden door, but it's a big sound. And Shakyamuni Buddha goes inside and the two of them sit together. There was a rule in earlier Mahayana Buddhism that two Buddhas can't be in the same place at the same time. It may not seem funny to us, but it did seem strange in those days for the Lotus Sutra was saying, here are these two Buddhas sitting side by side. And that became an inspiration for a lot of Chinese Buddhist art. If you go to museums and sometimes temples as well, you can sometimes see these two Buddhas sitting side by side on a dais or a bench or something like that. It comes straight out of this story from the Lotus Sutra. Well, the point I want to make, it may not seem like very much to you, but the point I want to make is that this stupa that emerges because someone has preached the Lotus Sutra, emerges from the earth and hangs in the sky beautifully. This stupa is also a lotus flower. It's exactly what it is. It's another version of the lotus flower. It's this, sorry, this, well, there we are, I think. And this artist has kind of done a little thing here with all of these curlicues to suggest something beautiful blossoming in the air. It's also the case that after this stupa emerges, and it's seen by everyone.